It's Electric Drives. Your electric vehicle future starts right now. Welcome to the show. I'm Anthony Algmin, and I'm joined by my co-host, Bob Reese. We created this show to make it easier for others looking to move to electric vehicles, and that's more and more people every day. We're out there using EVs in normal commutes and road trips, and we'll share the wisdom we've gained from living our lives with electric vehicles. You can join in the conversation by sending your questions and topic ideas to questions@electricdrives.us, by joining the Electric Drives Facebook group, and by becoming a patron at patreon.com/electric drives to get exclusive content and help support the show. Bob, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm at a hotel and I've got a Tesla destination charger all to myself, and there's a couple other ones available. And tomorrow night's the big question because I going to a hotel where I usually have to jockey for position with Teslas to use the chargers.
Got it. Have you encountered any more issues? You were talking about, and on a previous episode, you talked about how there was that one Tesla destination charger that locked out any non-Teslas, even using the Tesla tap or whatever, it wouldn't do it. Have you encountered that anymore, or was that a kind of a one-time thing?
I think I've encountered it before, and I didn't know it. And also, it may have been, I don't know if it was the cheap Chinese import adapter I was using, or if it was them locking me out. But the hotel that was locking me out before has opened up the network now for anybody to use it. He says, like, this is ridiculous. I'm paying for the electricity and so on, so I should be able to share it with everybody. You know, people can sit there and drool because the Tesla will charge faster than my car at the same destination charger because it'll take the full speed while I'm limited to 32 with mine, 32 amps.
But that can still vary. That's going to vary amongst a bunch of different cars. And I wonder,
Yes.
do the older Teslas, you may not know this, but do you know the older Teslas may not charge as fast as the newer Teslas either, I imagine.
Correct.
Yeah.
That is true. And it's, I think
so,
it's
I
like
mean, there's a wide range of charging abilities. So,
right. And I think it's like anything else. Like my 2015 Volt was state of the art, and that one could charge at 3 kilowatts. And now, you know, these are much faster nowadays.
Yeah, and that's going to continue to be the case. Like what we think is fast now, 5 years from now will probably be considered relatively slow. But it's now at the point where, like, especially on the fast charging side, like, I don't think it's a big deal at all anymore. Like at the speeds that I'm getting in a 2022 Tesla, like I could totally live with that for the rest of my car driving days because it just was a non-issue. In terms of how long it took to charge anything. I really want to play some of these video games that they keep putting on the car. And I'm like, I got no time for that. Like, I'm just like, the car's ready to go. I'm like, I got places to be. So yeah, there's all those gimmicks and stuff. And I have barely played with any of them.
Yeah. I don't understand. I mean, I can understand it because versus a gas stop, it is, it's slower than a gasoline stop. But usually when I do a gasoline stop, I'll get gasoline and I'll go in and use the restroom. And I'm doing basically the same thing now. I'll plug into the charger and go in, use the restroom, and come back out. And with the locations and so on, the fact that you can have a charger, even a DC fast charger at a restaurant and so on, it makes it a lot more convenient. When I talk about the fact that I'll go in and have lunch, I'm not using the sit-down 7-course meal lunch. I'm talking about picking up a Subway or something like that and eating at the store or eating in the car.
Yeah. Yeah. I one of the more recent times I pulled into the charging station with about 30%. And it was at a Meijer, so a big grocery store, Target combo type of thing. And it, I went in and it said, I got a notice on my Tesla app that it was going to limit my charging to 80% because it's a heavily trafficked charging stop. So they wanted to make sure that the things clear out,
Mm-hmm.
which when I walked out to the car, there were literally no other cars there. So I felt that was kind of stupid. But um, I actually was stressed out because I wasn't moving fast enough for the car because the car hit
Right.
80% while I was in the store, and I had to hurry up to get out there before the penalty time kicked in, where I would start getting pretty hefty fees by hogging a charger that, like I said, there were no other cars to use. But like that was more stressful for me that I wasn't fast enough, let alone that like the car was way more fast than what I needed. So I think it's I think they're still working out the finer points of that in terms of managing that, but at the same rate, like the fears of having to sit around waiting for your car to charge are heavily overblown.
Oh yeah,
Um,
very much so. Last Friday, I went to um, uh, Electrify America charger, and I was only at like 10% battery, and I walked over to the Sports Clips, should get paid endorsement,
mm,
and got a haircut and came back, and I was at 95%. So it's like I'm not
yeah,
sitting around waiting for this thing. I'll either be doing shopping
yeah,
or some other thing. So it's not like I'm sitting there pacing around or something like that. So, and that's with GM is very conservative, so their charging speed is very slow on this generation of vehicles because this is sort of like
yeah.
their second generation. If you look at the Volt being the first one, and the charging speeds on those are antiquated as compared to
Mhm.
what this one can do.
Yeah. Well, and I think about it too. It's like when you're charging your car, you're always multitasking. You're always doing something else.
Yeah.
Like you're working on office stuff that you would otherwise be sitting in an office doing, or you're doing, worst case scenario is you're watching a show on Netflix or something like while you're sitting in your car waiting for it to finish charging. Like you can do so many more things while charging your car than you ever could while filling your car with gas. Like
Yes.
when you're filling your car with gas, that is dead time. There is nothing else you're doing. Um Unless you're one of those people that are like talking on your phone while you're doing that, which is not an advisable thing to do while you're filling your car with gas. But like that's about all you could do. Like just you know, and it doesn't take a long time to fill your car with gas, obviously, but like with an electric vehicle, like you're always full of things to do. We all have phones. Like we could be checking our email or whatever for 5 minutes while it's topping off. It is not a big deal. So
Right.
anyway, so this was not the topic for today. But the
Oh,
topic for today that I wanted to talk a little bit more about is that, we're in this amazing time where there's so many new electric vehicles being announced, coming to market. Like it seems like a day doesn't go by where they're not announcing something new or a new model or a new price change or a new like something or other. I think just recently Elon Musk was selling like burnt hair cologne because he felt like there was something from the Boring Company that needed to have like some more branding or whatever. Like it's insane, but like loosely related to electric vehicles, I guess. But it's just like there's always something happening. And so what I wanted to think about is that I imagine that a lot of the folks that are listening to the show are probably on the runway. If they're not already driving an electric vehicle, they're on the runway to be getting one at some point. So I wanted to give a little bit of advice on what people should be thinking about or aware of if they are getting close to wanting to get into an electric vehicle. Like they're like, you know what? Really thinking about buying something here. I had a friend who was talking to me not on the show, and it wasn't really an official question, but he was saying, hey, um, I'm my car's getting a little bit older. I think I might consider. He has a lengthy commute like me too, and he was really thinking about doing electric, but he's like some of the costs of these things or what have you, and it's like, um, what should I be thinking about? And I had some ideas. So when you're thinking about that, like when you're giving advice, because I know you're talking to people all the time too, what are the things that you're telling them to think about when they're looking at an electric car or starting to get ready to purchase an electric car? Where do they go? Because there's some interesting things happening in the market today. Even though the economy's softening, we still have a lot more demand for electric cars than we have cars. So that leads to a couple things to be aware of. So what's your advice? And then I'll add some color commentary to that.
it's like any other purchase of a vehicle. What's your main reason for getting it? Because
Mhm.
you got price points. You got two cars, basically the Leaf and the Bolt, that are below $30,000, and then you can go all the way up to the Lucid Air. It's like $150,000. So, what do you need the vehicle for? For me, um,
Mhm.
it's my for my road warrior. So I need a car that is dependable but low cost and doesn't attract a lot of attention when I go into less desirable neighborhoods, and but still. And another nice thing about it is the size of the vehicle, because it's one of the smaller vehicles, and so it fits perfectly into downtown areas and large metropolitan areas, and zip in and out of traffic and that type of thing. So it probably boils
Mhm.
down to, what do you need a car for? If you're doing a lot of road trips, maybe you look at a Tesla or Lucid Air, or a Hyundai, or any of the
Mhm.
other 50,000 and up type of vehicles, and you'll have a longer wheelbase and a lot of creature comforts that you wouldn't be
Mhm.
getting in a more economical vehicle. And if you're
Yeah.
doing road trips,
So I
then you
think
look at
that's a good.
cars that do preconditioning, so that if you're doing a lot of road trips, and then they'll get the battery up to temperature, so your time at the
Yeah.
charging stations might be reduced, though I've never found that to be a big issue, basically. Because I can find enough stuff to do when I'm
Mhm.
at a charging stop.
So I think that's a good high level summary because we've talked a little bit about before how to choose which car you want, right? And so like gives us a good review of like picking the car, right? And so what I want to talk about though is actually purchasing the car and some things to keep in mind, because we can pick whatever car we want and some of them are not going to be available for a year or two
That's true.
in some
That's
cases,
true.
right? And so that's the thing that I want to focus in on, is to recognize, hey, you can want all you want, but there may not be a Chevy Silverado sitting in your driveway for another year and a half. And that's
Right.
the thing that we have to keep in mind, is that right now the demand for the available electric vehicles is pretty high across the board, and some of them don't even have, like, we're obviously American, and so when we think about even the US, like Hyundai, they're not even selling the Ionic 5 in all the states yet. So like
Right.
there's a lot more demand. There's a lot of places that need to get deliveries, and we still have supply chain issues. We still have a lot of challenges there. Not to mention, again, the influence of Tesla. You got to give them some credit, because there is such a push now to move beyond the traditional dealer model, that a
Mm-hmm.
lot of these electric cars are where automakers are saying we're going to start selling direct on these things. So Volvo is doing that, with the Polestar, and now they've tried to start doing that with their pure electric vehicles, even on the Volvo brand as well. Ford is going to do more of that in terms of taking orders. Now, some of them still require you to go to a dealer and like select the dealer, because they still have to work closely with their dealer networks. But most of those dealers are prohibited from selling an ordered vehicle above MSRP. Some of them honor that, some of them don't. So those are
Right.
things to keep in mind. And this is where it gets hairy again, because there's different rules for different manufacturers, and there's different adherence by different dealers, and that all gets complicated. And then you overlay, well, what is the timing of this? I've made the same mistake twice now, where I got rid of a car because I thought that the other car was going to be here next week, and ended up waiting weeks before I had a vehicle. I had to rent cars, I had to do some other gymnastics to bridge that gap, and that's unpleasant. And so like if you think you want an electric car next week, you're going to have two options. One is you're going to overpay for something used. That's why the used car market is so high. You can get that car next week, but you're going to be
Right.
paying new car prices for used cars, or you're going to need to wait. Like you're going to have to just say, keep driving that thing for probably a minimum of 2-3 months before you can take delivery of almost anything. And some of them, it's going to be a way longer wait than that.
That is definitely true, and uh, I'm not sure how a way around that. And I have noticed that some of the manufacturers have upped the number of vehicles that they are going to be manufacturing to try to
Mhm.
fill that void. And I also think it's with the change in due to COVID and so on, as far as supply chains and everything else,
Mhm.
it's sort of gotten perfect scenario for the manufacturers because it's like just in time inventory. I mean, they make a car and it's sold, so they don't have to
Mhm.
have it sitting on a dealer's lot collecting dust for a year or two. I mean, for every
Yeah.
electric car they make, it's already pre-sold before it even leaves the factory floor.
And talk about a risk to the dealers, because the dealers are sitting there saying, all we're doing is selling cars that are en route and we don't really have any inventory. We're not adding a lot of value to this process. None of the consumers really care. We're not able to, or allowed to mark things up above MSRP. And so they're starting, like, the manufacturers are like, we should just be selling direct and not having to pay these dealers a commission on this, because they're not doing anything other than taking the orders for the cars that we were already selling directly anyway. And so, like, that could really shake up the dealer network for cars in general. Like,
Oh yeah,
it's going to be an interesting evolution to see how car sales evolve broadly in coming years.
yeah. Isn't there state laws in many states that require vehicle purchases to go through a dealer?
Yeah, and there's
Uh,
a very powerful lobbying community to keep those
oh yeah,
to keep those laws in that way. But I think that there's a lot of customer demand saying we don't want to deal with that nonsense. Like, we don't, like, that's not helping us. And so I think that it may take some time, but I think people don't like paying for no value. And I think a lot of times dealers can complicate that purchasing experience in a negative way. Um, to the point where people don't want to deal with that. And so they'll actively seek out ways to um, not have to deal with that. And I think that's been a big component to, like, Tesla's success. Like, you're not buying it from a dealer, you're buying it from Tesla, and you don't get any add-ons. There's no VIN etching nonsense. There's no, like, oh, let's provide rust treatment on the underbody. None of that stuff. Like, there's plenty of shenanigans in Tesla land, but there is not the dealer markups at delivery that you get frequently. Almost at any dealership I can think of I've ever worked with has added something that I was like, I could have done without that 500 charge, but you deal with
yeah,
it. So, but I just, for the people that are out there, I mean, what I would recommend, frankly, is that if you have cash, like, because it'll be $100 or $500 to put down an order for a car,
yeah.
most of
Even
them
yeah,
are
some of them
refundable.
are definitely 2,500 for the Bolt.
Oh yeah, so if it's higher, then you got to really think about which ones you want, or what have you. But, like, if you can place an order for a relatively low fee that's refundable, nothing's stopping you other than losing that cash for a period of time to put orders down for these things. Tesla's fee is non-refundable, so if you want a Tesla, they want to lock you in and make sure that fee is theirs. But some of them, most of them, I think, are still taking a relatively nominal order fee that is refundable should you choose not to go through with the purchase. Take advantage of that. If you're like, I might be interested in that, Kia EV6, like, put down the order. Like, just go ahead and do it. Like, the dealers would love for you to cancel, because then they'll take it into inventory and then they will sell it for above MSRP, so they win in that case too. So
Right,
I think
right.
there's good reason to say, okay, I want to get in line now while you're figuring out what you really want to do. That's not a bad idea, especially if you really want to do something sooner than later. And that may factor in, like, how long are the delivery times. That's something that you should be asking these guys when you're shopping for cars. Say, hey, if I wanted one and I put in an order in today, when am I getting it? That
Hmm.
may still be somewhat error prone, but I think it's a worthwhile question to explore. Um, and I think that can really make an impact on what you choose to go with. Like, some of these cars that you're hearing a lot about, you're not going to get one anytime soon. Mustang Mach-E's, they stopped taking orders for those for a while. Like, I don't know if they've really reopened them or not. They're building more factories to make these in the US. There's a lot of things that are evolving. There's going to be more and more supply coming online in coming years. I think we're going to see a softening of the wait times and that stuff over time. But I think that's probably 2-3 years out before we start seeing things become more available, or seeing more inventory showing up at the dealers. And I also think too, what we want to have is, now that we've gotten this wave of a whole bunch of cars that have come online in the last year or two, as you get 3 years or so out from that original sale date, now you're starting to see those cars come off lease. And now you're going to
Mm-hmm.
start seeing a lot more used cars in that market. And that's really where you'll start to have some real options. If you wanted to get into something quickly and you didn't want to spend 50, 60,000, hopefully you'll be able to get that car that was, 40, 50, $60,000. Hopefully you'll be able to get that closer to 30, or less in some cases, in a few years. So there's going to be more options. It's definitely something to think about. I've long liked buying used cars, and my last couple cars have been new, mostly because of just availability. There just wasn't good options in the older models, and I cared too much about some of the technology components to it that I was willing to pay the premium for myself. But
Right.
there's a lot of things to think about that go beyond the traditional like car buying stuff. So I wanted to spend a few minutes just kind of talking about a couple of those things, giving people a little bit to think about. Bob, can you think about anything else? Like, you've definitely bought a few of these things. High level, I don't think there's huge impacts to insurance. I think some insurance companies are more eager to insure EVs than others. I think if you get a really high insurance quote for something, you can probably shop that around and do better. But my experience has been it's pretty comparable to the uh, same kind of vehicles that I'd be buying as an ICE car. There may be a slight premium, maybe 15-20%, but not like twice as much for the insurance or anything like that.
No, because just looking over our insurance bills, I don't see a major jump from, and then it's also hard to compare if a 10-year-old car versus a car that's only 2 years old too in our
Yeah.
fleet. So um, yeah, I don't see a biggie that way.
Yeah. Yeah. And like the financing and that stuff, it's all the same. Now, the one thing to keep in mind too is that with an electric vehicle, you probably are going to pay more for a comparable vehicle as an electric vehicle than for the internal combustion equivalent, but you're going to get some of that back in terms of more efficiency with, the electric charging versus gasoline, as well as wear and tear on the vehicle is just less in an electric vehicle. There's fewer parts to break. There's fewer hoses and fluids and maintenance needed, and all of that stuff. So you're going to save a fairly considerable amount. I mean, the Teslas literally say there's no regular maintenance. You do things as you need it, but you shouldn't need to do much. And that's pretty amazing coming from a place where not too long ago I was going in for an oil change every 3 months. Then it went
Right.
closer to a year, but still, those are usually pretty substantial costs. At least often pushing $100 just for the oil change, and then some of the other things, but with the synthetic oils and stuff. But I mean, just one more factor to keep in mind. To me, again, I like all of that stuff, but I really hated going to fill up my car every week with gasoline and having that $50 of petrol in my car every week. So that was a big deal for me, and just the convenience and the enjoyment of having that torquey electric motor to drive the car is just, I fell in love with it. I was never a big engine sound guy compared to a lot of motorheads, and I just loved the torquiness of the electric cars, even ones that weren't as fast as the one I drive now. But it's it definitely is something to keep in mind too. You have to decide, like you were saying at the start of the show, Bob, you got to decide what's important to you in the vehicle, and then you could strategize, okay, how do I get this vehicle? How do I get the one that I want? And what do I have to wait for? What trade-offs do I have to make? There's always trade-offs. And, the biggest trade-off of all is if you want everything, you want it to be super fast or whatever, you're going to be, very quickly you could be pushing six figures on a car, which
Oh
to
yeah,
me just
very
feels
easily.
way too much. So, it's up to you too. Is like, how much is it worth it to you to have, some things. I have a coworker who drives a Tesla Model S Plaid, and I'm in awe of that car. It looks amazing, and I would be so stressed out if it was my car trying to drive that, because the Tesla I have is less than half the cost of that, and much more, and it still feels too expensive for me,
Hmm.
but is definitely more my style. So anyway, yeah, Bob, anything else before we close it out for tonight?
Well, I can't think of anything.
Okay, well, that wraps up our show for today. So don't forget to subscribe and hit that YouTube bell icon. Please send your questions and topic suggestions to questions@electricdrives.us, and we'd love for you to join us on Facebook and Patreon. All the links are, of course, in the show notes. Thank you for spending some time with us, and we wish you a smooth road ahead on your own electric drives.